All right, guys, Ryan Dunford here for the second video in this. As people get on, if you could just let me know you hear me okay, that would already be a better start than the first video there. My name is Ryan Dunford. I am with Team Lucy Racing, her Horizon Hobby. This video we're going to cover building bag B, which is the shocks of the 8X 2.0 kit. We are building in this series the Nitro version. Hi Ronnie, thank you sir. And then I'm also going to build the Turnbuckles, and we'll go from there. Both these are usually pretty straightforward, but just kind of always want to show people kind of what we're doing right now and the way that I build stuff up. Whether it's right or wrong, it just happens to be the way I do it. And then we'll go from there. So give it another minute or two. Again, these are recorded so that people can watch them later on. I also like to show some things that we kind of do from time to time, and some kind of little tips and tricks that we have. So I'm going to start with bag B, and then we'll do bag C. So we'll start with the shocks. To start with, first things first, go to the header card. Again, I know it gets repetitive, but I talk about this in every video. I always cut off the very top of the bag. This part, obviously there's nothing there. Dump it all out and take this main bag and I stick it off to the side here. And then the shock bag's a little different. So the shock bag, normally we've got all these mini bags that say like B1, B2, normally you can just kind of go along and do bag B1 and then bag B2 and so on and so forth. But that isn't how it works. So I'm using a different weight oil than this because where I'm at, it's pretty hot right now. I live in Riverside, California. Plus I got a slightly different shock package going on, and I'll tell you guys about that. I'm not trying to hide anything, but this oil, it works fine. It's not exactly the same as the TLR like bottles that we sell. This stuff is all packaged in the United States. We control it very, very, very high tolerance. These are good tolerance, but it's not something that we control. So I'm going to set those to the side. So for the shocks, I'm pretty much going to start up in the corner here and put, this is a little itty bitty bag of stuff. So this is all the like little screws and stuff that work in here. We're going to dump that out to start with. Okay, it looks clear, but again, I'm going to take it, I'm going to stick it in this big bag because there's a bunch of little things in there. Maybe I got it out, maybe I didn't, but I'd rather not put it in the trash can. That way, if I have to go hunting, because I couldn't find everything, I'm going to hunt in this rather than having to hunt through my trash can. So the first thing you'll always see me do is just kind of go through. I know how many of each thing there's supposed to be, but you can look at the manual and make sure. But I mean, the easiest thing to understand about this particular part is there's 4 shocks. So for the most part, there should be 4 of just about everything here. Little tiny gold washers, which are near impossible to see on this colored towel. Sorry about that. Let's see here. So that's a shock washer. Shock washers. And you can see, I thought I was actually missing some gold washers, and I'm not. I just didn't have everything out. Plus, now it's all set out there, right? Good to go. The next thing I'm going to grab, I'll open up bag B1. Again, for the shocks, you pretty much just get everything out. Something to know about the new car versus the old car. The front shock shafts are the same length as the 8X 1.0. The rear shock shafts are a new length. So that's important to note. And then you get 2 5 by 1.5 flat pistons and 2 5 by 1.6 flat pistons. Now, if you're old like me, it can be hard to read, but I don't know that I can get this in either of these cameras. But anyway, the pistons are actually marked. Not going to happen. Okay. Anyway, so the 1.6s are meant for the back, and the 1.5s are meant for the front. I don't know. So to most people, the holes you can tell, but they are marked. If you have a hard time seeing them and you're old, you get some magnifying glasses. The 1.6s, the flats for the rear, I'm going to set to the side because I'm actually using a tapered piston in the rear. So I'm using a tapered piston. It starts off life as a 5 1.5. So I have those already. I'm just going to set those to the side. And I'm actually going to start building stuff up here. So you guys can kind of see some of what we do when we say, okay, so my front shock uses a 5 by 1.5 flat piston that I put an extra 1 millimeter hole in. Okay, that means technically it ends up being 6 holes, but one of them is really, so I've got a pin vise here, a pin hand vise, and this is a 1 millimeter, it's actually like 1.05. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I mean, I could just, you know, not show you guys this stuff, but you know, when we say this, whoops, I got stuck in the towel. Not a good start. You know, so I'm pretty inboard, but that's not the end of the world. So I'm just taking, on the laptop. That'll be good for it. And that probably should have been out a little bit further. This is for me. This kit's going to be for me. So, you know, for who it's for, is what it is. I make sure all the flashing's off of the hole. You know, I'm just going to make sure it's all cleaned out there. But now you can see there's an extra little tiny hole in there. Okay. And I'm going to do the other piston too. But now that I drilled that one where it was, I'm going to try to do this one pretty similar. There we go. It's better not on the towel. I did it on the foam thing and that seemed to work better. Provides a better backstop. But we'll go through there. Drilling in new holes, not as easy. Making them bigger or smaller, that's a lot easier, obviously. But anyway, so that's now the front piston I want to use. So again, a little extra hole there. I'm going to take the front shock shafts, some dynamite shock pliers here. So this is just going to go in the second slot. Basically, it provides a radius plier to hold. It does all kinds of other things, putting balls in and out, whatnot, but it's just a dynamite it's called a shock tool, but and then the way this goes, the stack up is big washer, piston, and I always put the piston so that the number's facing up. And then this little medium-sized screw and the washer. Now, some people use thread lock in here. If it's like a World's A main, you better believe it's going to get thread lock. For the most part, though, I put these in and I just tighten them. Now it's a little tiny head and a little tiny screw, so I just get it taut. So that's a front shock shaft. Front shock shaft's the shorter shock shaft, obviously. These pistons are a new diameter. That's why they're referred to as a V2 piston. And so there's a little bit more blow by with them, and they tend to go through chops and bumps better. So again, big washer, piston, and then I get the upper screw and the washer together. Now, I don't know if you noticed that last one I started, I kind of always go backwards until I hear it click. There it goes. and then I go forward, which means I found the thread. Okay. If you go to start it and it's really hard, that means you're already starting to cross thread things. So pull it out, find that, and go from there. So get that in all the way. There we go. Again, if you are going to use thread lock, I typically recommend just literally like a dab of blue, and you almost wipe most of it off on a towel and then put it in there. You really just want it to kind of gum up the threads some. So anyway, there's my front shock shafts set up. Now this, I'm going to loosen and take out the 1.0. Again, I think it's actually 1.05. And now I'm going to put a 1.9 in, which I already measured both of these and everything. So I'm going to take what is a 1.5 taper V2 piston and drill one of the holes out now to a 1.9. Now it's a tapered piston. You want to get all this flashing off, you know, blow the plastic out. And I just want to just double check, make sure it spins good. Okay. So then the other thing I do is I take my fine tip black Sharpie and I mark the hole that I drilled out. That way I know it's drilled out. Okay. All right, so that's good. And then I'm also going to mark, because I know what this piston is going to stay the same. I actually wrote, if you can see it, 1.9 and marked that one hole. So that is what is called a 4x1.5. So 4 of the holes are 1.5 and 1x1.9. Okay, so I'm going to do the next side as well, or the next piston. And again, just take your time with this stuff, guys. I mean, none of this is difficult by any means, but the more precise you can make it, the more consistent you're going to be from shock to shock. You know, if you start getting all wonky on holes or trying to power through them with a power tool or something like that on these pistons, you can get a 1.9 that turns into a 2.0 or a 2.2 really quick. So it's just best to take your time. And then the one thing when I'm drilling a piston out, I do also do it opposite the 1.5 marking. That way I still have plenty of flat room to write on. So now I have 2 pistons that I want to put in the rear of my shocks. I like these. We run on pretty bumpy tracks here. And so that's why we like this rear piston. We ran the other piston for a long time. That's why it's in the kit. It was a piston we used on a lot of the smoother tracks when it was cooler out. And as soon as we got to kind of the warmer summer months and the bumpier tracks for the summer, then, you know, we changed. So setups change. You'll want to have them all in your box. There's nothing wrong with the stock shock, the piston that it comes with at all. It's just, you know, setups are very, very much a personal preference thing. So again, I'm going to go till it clicks, and I'm going to go in. So there's 1 thread starting position on the screw. There's 1 on the shock shaft. So that's what I'm finding. And then I'm putting the piston so the flat is up and the dome is down. Okay, that's what's called taper down. So if you see a setup sheet that says taper down, again, big washer, piston, and then little washer, not copper washer, just little silver washer. don't think I have the head in there all the way yet. There it goes. The head can be a really tight fit with the 050. Technically, it's a 1.3. So, all right, so those are built up. Now I'm not going to lose even more of the small parts. Keep those off to the side. Here are shock tools. We do sell carbon fiber versions of them. So like this would replace this. And then it's just a small piece of carbon fiber that makes it easier. You get one for the top too, but for the top, I just stick a wrench through it. But this also works to adjust your turnbuckles. This end, in case people don't know what it's for, well, this end can go over the shock top. This end is to either turn your engine off by putting it in the exhaust pipe, or you can also use this, just hit the flywheel real quick and turn it off so that you don't have to hurt yourself. And then this, technically, might still be an old 540 nut. In all fairness, it's probably a 7mm nut now. And then this side was always meant just to kind of hold a shock shaft while you were doing stuff to it. But yeah, anyway, these I take and I file. Let me go ahead and open up this next bag here. This is all the seals and stuff, so just be careful you don't cut any of the rubber when you're cutting all this stuff. I can get rid of this drill bit now. Nothing looks like it's there, but again, I'm just going to set it off to the side. I've got 4 giant O-rings, 4 emulsion seals, 4 lower cap O-rings, and a whole bunch of middle stuff. So I'll find the O-rings first. So the O-rings are the rubbery parts, right? All right. And then the lower is the big part. And then this, you get 4 thin washers and 4 thicker washers. Okay, so these are all 3.5mm parts because the shocks are 3.5mm. These parts have not changed. The only thing here that got a slight update were the emulsion seals. The emulsion seals, for some reason, were like kind of sucking in and becoming a D. So these they're a little bit larger to try to alleviate that. So here are, oops, these can both go over here. Here are the metal shock parts. Again, the bags go into here. Now, again, I found everything, but I'm still just keeping everything aside. Let's go ahead and take all these parts off. The reason the factory sends them this way is so that you don't end up getting parts that, 1, don't thread on properly, but 2, you know you get all the parts. So go ahead and they don't scratch that way too. But 2 rears, 2 fronts. So on the shocks, the lower cap is the same as before. The collar here is the same as before. The upper cap is the same. The shock bodies, the rear body is the same as the existing buggy. The front body is different. It's shorter. We lowered the tower and shortened the shock a little bit, but didn't take out any throw or travel. So for me, I kind of like to build the bottoms up first. So basically what you got is really thin washer goes in first. Got a X-ring or O-ring. You got the thicker center washer, X-ring or O-ring. And then you've got this other O-ring that goes around the outside because that's going to hold the cap in place. And then you've got the bigger guide washer, right? This has 2 sides. You can see the thicker and the thinner side. The thick side goes in. See, if you put the thin side, it moves all over the place. If you put the thick side in, it doesn't move around. That's how it should be. And it should sit flush. If it doesn't sit flush, something's not in there right. And then this, a lot of people will take and they'll tighten those all down all the way. I don't. I tighten them until they kind of get snug, and I'll show you. I tighten them up a little later on. So that's how you build it. So again, it's the really, really thin washer, an X-ring, and again, you want to make sure everything sits flat in there. And then a thicker washer, X-ring, make sure that's all down in there. This is the smaller O-ring. It goes against the base like this. Okay, and then this thicker portion up here. Oh my God. All right, sorry about that, guys. All right, so I'll build the rest of these up really quick because I'm sure you guys are probably already kind of bored. It's the problem with building stuff that's kind of repetitive. It just kind of is what it is. I mean, I guess in theory I could build like one shock and one turnbuckle and then finish the stuff at the end answering questions, but then it's not all done at the end, and technically you can be building along. All right, so there's that. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the emulsion seals in the cap. So you got a cap and an emulsion seal, and there's two different directions, right? The flat portion goes towards the cap so that it's got the dome out, right? And I don't know, kind of pinch it a tiny bit, and push it in there, and then I take a 1.5 and I kind of just run around. All right, so now it's in, nice and centered, and I will do that multiple times. Hopefully everybody's doing okay. Let me finish these caps. Oh, well, yeah. See, this is why I set out all my parts. I don't know if you guys noticed it, but see these two rubber parts? If you don't have those on there, this cap doesn't stay put. These are essentially what stop the cap from coming off. So, but that's why I set everything out, so that when I'm done, I can look back, right? But no big deal. Luckily, I looked down and caught it now versus when everything was in one piece. That would have really sucked. And then these go in, there's a groove in there. These fit into that groove. Okay, so I will go ahead and see if there's any questions really quick, and then we'll continue along. Okay, what are we building? All right, take a black Sharpie to the numbers on the piston to see the numbers better. Yep, that works really good, Tony. What he's talking about, here's my 1.6s. So if you take a black Sharpie and lightly go over the top with it, so you're not getting down in the ridges, you can suddenly read that it's a 1.6. So it's a good one. I like that tip. Red Sharpie over numbers, then wipe off top. Oh, well, yeah, that's another option. Shocks for 8X 2.0. Why don't you use M2 washers? Block this person again. These are the washers we've used for some time, and they've always worked, and they stop really well. So, but I'm going to go ahead and continue building the shocks. So now I have a couple different shock wheels here. I have a 45 and a 42. Again, it's warm, so normally we run 42/40. but it's warm right now, so we're running a little. When I say warm, I mean for us warm is between 95 and 110 is my version of warm. So I'm going to take, here's my rear shock. I'm going to put just a dab of oil on there. And I'm going to bring it in to the inside of the rear shock here. Okay, so now you can see I got it in there. Now I'm going to run that all the way up as far as I can. I'm going to back this off a little bit. I let my hands have oil all over them. Kind of wiggle all that stuff, all those internals around a little bit. So now I've got it all lined up, and now I can go in and I can tighten that fully if I could grab it. Okay, it is fully tight. So now it's a nice smooth action. So there's a rear shock. Again, it's rear shock shaft into, I should do it over a different rag and not ruin my good towel. And for what it's worth, I usually wash my hands before every single video because I do tend to get crud all over my hands. But again, I'm going to loosen, kind of wiggle this around a little bit. And while it's in like this, I'm going to tighten that up. Right? That way I can just make sure that it's nice and everything's centered really well. And it doesn't really matter what oil you're using for just sticking this in there because it doesn't change much anything. So again, and I know it's repetitive. Sorry guys. That on, didn't get very oily. Finally, I got one right. Shocks are kind of one of those things that when they're new, it's nice to have new shocks, but man, building shocks takes a while. Just so many little things in shocks. All right, there's that. I can stay open over yonder. So now I need the next bag open. Again, I'm going to make sure everything's not in the way so I don't cut anything because you've got the shock parts in here. And the first thing I'm going to do is lay everything out. 2 front, 2 rear. Okay, so now these have a right and a left. So you can see, if I hold it right, nope, okay. So that one's got a big open area, and then this side doesn't. Okay, which means the head of the screw is going to go to that side. So there should be 2 of each. So there should be 2 rights and 2 lefts in here, and for me there are. Then I've got 4 shock bottoms and 4 upper bushings. And these are all 3.5 mil lowers. So ready to go there. Let's see here. So now I'm going to take my front shock. I'm going to put my boot on. There's already a little residual oil on the shaft. I don't put holes or anything in these anymore. The problem with 8 scales, if you put holes in them, well, you get dirt in there. So the dust boot doesn't really do good. So basically, as you can see, I'm going to go like this, get it started, and then, so I'm holding the shaft in place, and then I can push the bottom over the threads, and then I can put the top in place. So now I've got the threads out, right? And again, there's some residual oil on this already. Some people will oil this more, and you can. You don't need a lot of oil in there. Extra oil doesn't really do much other than make more of a mess. So there's that. And then the part that I love so much is threading on these rod ends, the shock ends. That's where like a reverse shock plier helps. See where the pivot point's up here and you grab really far? It means I don't have to grip as hard. I don't really have, if you think about like a pair of pliers, right, which you don't want to use because it'll mar things, you got this point here and then you're grabbing out here. So you're having the leverage, you just don't get nearly as much leverage. So you got to squeeze really, really hard. And one, you don't want to use those. But so now I've got the shock boot on there and everything. Let's go ahead. And this, you just kind of take your time getting it started. The threads are tapered, so you kind of go at it. Hey, Rudy, how's it going, buddy? You can stick like something in there and use it. But you go up until basically it doesn't turn. I mean, you don't want to, super manhandle it, but you basically run it all the way in there until it doesn't turn. And all four of these are going to be the same. This is probably the crappiest part of building shocks, in my opinion. The second crappiest is threading these adjuster nuts on. Just to be honest with you guys, but like you can go like that. And if you don't want to just use your finger strength, you can just kind of do one of these numbers until you get close and then throw stuff at your laptop. But I always like to use my hand at the end because the last thing I want to do is strip those out. It's getting hot in here. Sorry, guys. This is my second video of tonight, if you weren't on the first one. So, and just kind of be super careful with the first couple threads. Make sure it's straight. And then after that, it's pretty simple. This is one of those things in life as a vendor you wish you could make easier for customers. But unfortunately, it is what it is. And then you look at it, I mean, if there's like half of a thread showing or something, you're okay. I mean, it's not the end of the world. All of your up travel and down travel is predicated by the 8 scale versus a 10 scale. In 10 scale, that distance there is measured and looked after because that's essentially your droop number in 10 scale. So in 8 scale, we got droop screws and all that fun jazz, so we don't have to worry about that as much. But yeah, you can use a tool if it makes it easier. Just watch the threads and don't go too aggro. And don't go too fast. There's no reason to. We're not trying to win a race or anything building a car. We're trying to make it so that when it's time to race, it's enjoyable to race. So let me see if there's any questions here. Okay. How often do you replace the X-rings in the shocks? I usually replace my X-rings before a major event. So like I do at least DNC and Silver State most years. So I'll usually replace them just before that, and then usually one time coming out of summer. But I mean, they're pretty good. They don't swell that much. I just do it before the events just to make sure I have the best performance. As far as oil, to be honest, I change oil often enough between temperature changes and event changes and stuff like that, I mean, I'm not putting oil in just to refresh it, if that makes sense. So the biggest thing that's really important is to always just make sure, while I'm talking, I'm going to put these little gold washers on these screws because it's a lot easier if those are already on there. The biggest thing is to make sure that, if you're traveling from one area to another and you're running what we're running, which these are called emulsion shocks, you need to rebleed them. So you don't necessarily always have to put more oil in, but you at a minimum have to, compress them and let the pressure out of them. Otherwise the car won't work as well. You also want to do that a couple times during a day if the temperature changes a lot or things like that. So, just stuff to look out for. So next, I'm going to go ahead and fill these. I'm going to grab this here. because it'll just make it so I can go faster. And this part right here, it comes off, but this is a car stem we had at one point that it just holds 4 shocks. So nothing too crazy. The one thing I do make sure I do, whenever I take shocks apart, you'll see that everything's kind of in line here. So I always make sure that the cap that I have goes with the body. So when I take shocks apart, I don't just have 4 caps and 4 shocks and put them all back together, because the threads and the way they start into a cap and the body and everything, it's always going to be a little bit different. It's always going to be slightly cocked or clocked different. And so I'll show you towards the end, I mark where my shock collars are. So if I mix up 2 caps, all of a sudden my shock collar lines won't match anymore, and then my numbers won't work and it'll be all haywire. So you'll just see, so I'll make sure I put this one here, the second one will go into here, and so on and so forth. So let me just show you how I fill stuff. So my fronts, which are the 2 shorter ones, are going to be 45. So I'm going to put oil. I'm not sure if you can see it at all. You can't really, can you see it in that one? I don't know. About halfway up, I'm going to take, especially with a new shock, and I'm going to run the piston past the oil, right? And then I'm going to slowly pull the piston back down into the oil. That makes sure that underneath the piston is all full of oil now. So now I'll take it and I'll top it off. A new shock, you have to go pretty much to the, so that the oil's flat on the top. As you go along, you'll learn other shock, like if you're rebuilding like used shocks, they're not quite, you can kind of leave it a little bit in and still get it to bleed very well. I know everybody's always super adamant, oh, fill it all the way, bleed it out. Well, an emulsion shock is partially air and partially oil anyway. That's why it's called emulsion. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm frugal when it comes to stuff. I know shock oil, you know, you use it up enough that it starts to get a little pricey over time. But you can see those are sitting there. A lot of people like to pump the shocks or get all the air out, this or that. So getting the air out of shocks, it can be really important if you're running like a bladdered shock. But again, when you're running an emulsion shock, it is air mixed with oil. The one benefit to making sure that, you know, all the air's out of it to begin with is just to make sure that they're equal, that the 2 shocks are equal. So again, filling it up about halfway, I mean, doesn't really matter as long as it's over the piston enough to bring it up and bring it out. Oops, stick this in here. And again, the rear shocks are longer, so when you bleed them, more oil will come out of them versus the fronts. So don't freak out if that's the case. Oh, actually, we're going to leave this one because I'll show you there's something else I use this for. All right, so now when it comes to an emulsion shock, hopefully I can show this well enough. We already have our seal in here. The bleeder screw is out of the shock, okay? So now I'm going to go ahead and put this on here. Get my shock tool. It's going to go up the base here. It's the other thing that's nice about the carbon one is you can put it up there and you don't have to worry about the shock boot or anything. And then I'm going to grab and I'm going to tighten this all the way tight till it stops. Okay. So now that's on there. The reason I tighten that all the way tight is so that always stops in the same exact spot, so that my marking of everything, I can make sure that my ride height's correct and everything. So from here, let me kind of push these off to the side. See if I can show this okay. Let me grab this. It'll probably be easier. So I'm gonna tip this like this, so that this is not straight up, but mostly up. Maybe this will be the best way to show it. Hopefully y'all can see that. We'll do it 4 times, but you can see it's at an angle. I'm slowly pushing up the base. And see how the oil starts to slowly come out. Push it up. Okay, I'm going to wipe that off. Sit this against the bottom, and I'm gonna grab my 1.5. I'm gonna put this screw on it, and I'm going to push down so that the last bit of that oil compresses out of there from the shock boot and everything. And I'm going to get this screw taut, tight, and wipe this off. And that is a full shock build, bleed, everything, okay? So now it goes, it stays up there really well, right? And that's one shock. So I'm going to do that 4 times. Hopefully by then, it's actually easier if I take this and I get this on the wrench already. Let me do that. So again, take this, obviously not dump it over. Hopefully everybody's can see this okay. All right, that one's pretty tight. That's okay. Again, I'm gonna take this. I know it's hard. Oh, here we go. Let me move it towards the camera so you can see, kind of turn it, tilt it to the side so the oil doesn't go completely everywhere. Put it on, push down, and get that going. And again, you don't have to, I mean, it's got a copper washer there to seal it. You don't have to fully freaking manhandle the thing and everything like that. So there's those two. And then we'll just go ahead and do the rears really quick so that we're continuing along. Okay. Now again, more oil will come out of the rear shock than the front shock. And the other thing too is if oil comes out like right away, chances are when you were putting everything on and together, you probably got a bit crazy with things. And I forgot to put the screw on there again. Oh, see that? Okay. I don't know if you guys could see that, but all of a sudden a bubble came out of there. And if you saw the way the oil shot out of there, I can tell you for a fact that that shock has got way too much air in it right now. So I'm going to pull this one apart. So if you saw the oil was like coming out, and then all of a sudden it was like, and like rushed out. And basically the way to tell would be to put the screw in and then you run it up and down and you'll see that there's a dead space. Yeah, see all that oil that came out of there? So if you look here, it's like there's not much oil there. So we'll put more back in there. Definitely shouldn't be that low. And we'll go to the next one. So hopefully this one will be better. And that's how it goes sometimes. It doesn't happen too often, as long as you keep everything okay. See, now this one was nice and consistent coming out. Well, was. And now you can see it's just running. So, awesome. This is the fun of, this is something that pretty much only ever happens with new shocks too. So, but rather than cover it up and just kind of keep building and then fix it later, I don't want you guys to see, you know, if you see something like that and something looks wrong, it's probably wrong. So, anyway, what else do we got out here? Will the videos be uploaded to the YouTube channel? Yes, they will. Is there a reason why the black nut that threads onto the bottom of the shock body is not made to fit a wrench to tighten it on. Well, we did that at one point, and people would lock it on there so hard that they couldn't get it off. That's why we got rid of that. You not measuring shock length? Nope, I am not. Not overly concerned about the length of the shock. If my car gets the droop it needs to get, it doesn't hurt to measure shock length. So shock length on 8 scale is the main time that it affects anything. Is like if you want the piston to be a little bit further up in the travel or whatnot, and you're really good, well, then you can do stuff like loosen the shock end a little bit. I don't recommend that for most people anyway. So most people I would tell to just, kind of just thread them in and run. And most people won't even notice that. There's only like one person I know of that really notices that, and that's Dakota. So anyway, so now you can see this rear shock, right? Goes, stays, no rebound other than what the boot's really pushing out, and everything's perfectly fine. So we'll do this other one. Oh my gosh, I love YouTube these days. Let's see here. Okay, so let's see what else we got here. Will these be, yes, answer that. Wish we still had those car stands available. Yeah, Michael, it's something I looked into, and there's a chance they'll come back. If it just, so there's only so many of us and only so much time in the day, and it's kind of on my list of stuff because we've kind of abandoned them for 10th and 8th scale, so to speak. We want to make an 8th scale one, so basically one that's actually truggy height. And so I have a quote and everything for it. Honestly, I just need to start it. It's on the list. It just kind of falls a little low, in all fairness. Again, the one thing I always make sure I do, guys, whenever you're using a wrench, always make sure you're pushing into the screw when you're using it. That way it stays nice tight in there and you don't strip stuff out. So there's 4 shocks that are built. Let me go ahead and show you. So for the adjuster nuts, I actually prefer, you can use shock oil, but it's a little thin. I actually prefer a little bit of diff oil because it's a little thicker. The problem is it's thicker and it's a pain in the butt to get it in there right. But I get that on the O-ring, and then I wipe off the top and bottom, and I'll do this, unfortunately, 4 times. Makes a bit of a mess, but it makes it so that adjusting this nut doesn't want to make you slit your throat. So you can see I'm kind of getting it, massaging it all the way around the O-ring. And then wiping off the top and bottom. Wipe off my hand. But that's also what you can use shock oil for. Again, it works pretty good. It just doesn't work as good to me because it's not as thick, so it doesn't stay on as well. But let's go ahead and get these going. So you kind of go back and forth until you get them started, and they should spin fairly freely. So the rubber is going up past the threads first, and then the threads that are on the collar engage. So you kind of want to massage the rubber part up there and kind of go backwards until you feel that same click, and then get them going. Some people, now I'll grab and I'll wipe the oil off the bottom now, because obviously you just got oil on stuff. But you can kind of do one of these numbers now, and it actually moves okay. So I'm going to go about there, wipe off the rest of the threads again, and then I'm going to do the other side, front, and then I'll measure them. So I'll show you that part. So again, I'm going kind of backwards right now, getting the rubber part up there, and then there it goes. I felt the click in my hands, and now I can go up. And wipe the oil off the bottom. Again, just kind of get it all the way up there. So this part, if like you don't know to oil those O-rings, I mean, you'll be here for a long time threading these up here. It sucks. But now I'm going to come back with my calipers, and I'm going to measure the distance. I'll show you why. So this is basically 6.5. I'm going to bring this one until it's 6.5. 6.50, 6.50. So now those are exactly the same. And so that's the first step. So now let me get the rear ones on there, and then I will show you. The rear ones don't have as quite a long a thread. Wipe these off. Let's see. All right. Yeah. These aren't that exciting. Sorry, guys. Trying to go as fast as I can so you guys aren't stuck here. So if you do have questions, you could ask away. But again, these will all be loaded online. So wipe off the oil, and now I'll measure. Three. Okay, and 3. All right, so now those are the same. So now when I put my shocks on the car, you'll see one side obviously has the screw, one side doesn't. I always want that screw in. That way, if it's out and I crash, dirt can get in there. If it's in and I crash, I mean, this is a really spectacular crash, dirt's not going to get in there. So these two shocks, this is how they're going to live, in. So I'm going to take and I'm going to push these shock bushings in so the flat is in the same side. So that's one. And that's one. So now you can see, if you look at the two shocks, the shock bushings, flats are out, screws are in. So that's a right and a left shock for me. Okay, so I'll do the same thing on the rear. And that one goes this way. Okay, and then, so there's the rear, right? Oops, not if I don't show them to you right. Flats on the front, screws to the inside. Now, the sides that I have the flats on, right in the center, I'm going to Dremel a little line. So the other thing, if you don't have a Dremel or you're not comfortable doing this, you're literally just taking it and just hitting. I mean, it's really quick. The other thing you can just do is use a silver Sharpie. But the problem with nitro cars is the silver Sharpie, by the time you get fuel and everything on it, will eventually go away. I'm going to take, doesn't need to go that fast. And make sure you do it on the same side. Again, we're not going for any weird perfection or anything. I think if my Dremels had better days. That's what happens when you lend stuff out. So now I'm going to get this aluminum shavings off of my body. All right. So now you can see my shocks. Here's both the inside, and you can see there's a line right on the T, on the L, basically right in the middle. So now when these are on my car like this, right, if I need to turn my shock a quarter turn, they both go a quarter turn. I always know where they are, as long as I always put the caps on the same sides and always tighten them all the way, right? So those are marked, good to go. The other thing I'm going to do while I'm here is I always put these on with the flat facing out. That way it doesn't fall off over a nut or anything, which means the back of it, I'm then going to take this side of the front and I'm going to write on here 45 with a Sharpie. It can come off with motor spray, no problem, right? So now that's on the back side of that. And on the rear, I'm going to do the same thing. I put it on this way, right? Which means this is the front, which means this is the rear. So now on the rear, I want the flat part towards me. And these have 42 in them. Yep, that's good. I'm glad I put the right thing in there. So now both of those are marked. So now when I look at my car, I know what's in them. Unless, of course, it comes off. That kind of sucks. So now I'm going to put the balls in. Okay. If you look at this, let's see if I can show you. All right, see that side? All of that material looks like all the same, normal. If I turn this around, and get the right, see how there's like a shiny ring there? That's the side that comes off the mold. So that's the side I'm gonna push the ball into this side because it's already a little bit more open. So it might as well not stretch out the other side now. So I'm gonna put the ball in. So technically, I can use these pliers, right? And go pop, and then that pops it right in. It's nice and free. Or if I don't have these, again, find the shiny side, put the ball there. For these, you just push and kind of twist it a little sideways. You're not having to push too hard. Shiny side. And shiny side. Okay, so there's that. So remember when I was telling you this is the other way to tell on these? If you look at this, this lighting sucks. Sorry, guys. See how this side over here has the channel and this side doesn't? That means the screw head goes through there. And what I mean by that is this side, the screw head slides in and then it threads into this side. Whoops, right? So this just pushes in and out. But let me get my springs out. We are using the springs that come in the kits nowadays, guys. The rears are technically the same as the Evo springs, but we have a 3-pack and there's a new softer one and stuff like that. So the fronts are new and there's a spring pack for that too. I'd kind of massage them for, 5 or 10 little doodads. That way they won't break in quite as hard. Springs, when they're brand new, usually about halfway through a tank or through a full tank, you'll want to readjust the ride height. And shocks are nearly done, guys, so I'll finish these and then answer any questions you have, and then we'll get on to the turnbuckles. Those don't take too long. So, all right, so now I've got my front shock. My front shock, this shock is going to go on and be like this. So this, and then there's going to be one over here. And when I beam my go on, you guys are the front of the car and I'm the back of the car, right? That's how my shocks are going to go on, this inside. Well, that means I want this the opposite way. I want that to the outside. So for me, the flange always goes opposite this. That way the screw's on the outside of the car and it can't hit the arm. So this side will go on opposite that. And what I mean by that is, so here's this. That means this side would be facing you towards the outside of the car. When I go to put this on, I want that channeled part to face you as well because I want the screw head facing out. So my shock, again, you're the front of the car. This would be now my right side shock. So this is in to the middle of the car. This is the center of the car, right? And then the screw head will be out here because that's where the channel is. Again, you get two lefts and two rights. So here's this. That's really far away, so that's not going to help much. And then these springs do have little lines on them. This is gold. And we'll put that on. Whoop. Okay, so that would make it so that now my screws screw in to the front side here. They push in, right? But so you guys can see it again, hopefully better on this camera. You can see the screws now, right, opposite this screw. And when I run them in, I just use my driver. I'm not really tightening them all the way. That way there's a little bit of play. You can see here, I've almost got the ability to stick my fingernail behind that so that this can move around a tiny bit, but now it's not going to fall off, right? So again, just going to run it in a little bit. There's front shocks, and then the rears. Again, now the car's coming this way. These are Brown springs that are equivalent to Brown Evo springs. We offer one lighter, one heavier than this in the 3-pack now. But we use these springs that are actually in the kit now. Okay, so that is not right. This is that shock, so that turns around, which means it's this one. And I only do all this just so that when I'm going through my shocks, I know kind of everything that's going on. And I know my shocks because everything's on there a certain way. This is how they're also built in the manual, all that fun stuff. So there's shocks. So I got shocks built. Those are ready to go on the car now. Good to go. Let's see what questions I have. I bought 2 kits and I want to thank you for the extra bodies. You're welcome. That's actually because of my mistake. So I got to get in trouble, but everybody else got to get happier. I don't even have questions, but the stream makes me want to race 8 scale. Go for it. Wow, Dunford. That's awesome, Burling. Love you, buddy. Any way to fix the front axles from coming out besides the Mugen out drives? Well, Mugen out drives are an option. And again, this isn't everybody. It's like very few people, but it's like 1 out of every 20 or 30 people it's happening to. So Mugen front out drives, just a longer front out drive. If you can find other brands that are longer, I just happen to know that one is. Incline spindle. Or the 1.0 front universals. All right, thanks for sharing all this. How do you replace the shock bushings, or is it better to buy new caps? You just push them out from the other side. I've replaced shock bushings before. I definitely wouldn't. I'm cheap. I wouldn't buy new caps just to replace those bushings. And we do sell the bushings separately. Is there a reason why the black nut that threads onto the bottom of the shock body is not made to fit a wrench? You asked this and I had answered it already, but It's because if we make it so you can put a wrench on it, people tighten it so tight that they haven't been able to get it off. My car went together great. Started last Friday night. I'm glad to hear that. Any spacers between the A and B blocks? Might have missed it. Yes, there is one shim that goes, I mean, it's a setup thing. You can put it in the back or the front, but most of us run the washer in the front and the arm to the back. But I'm going to go ahead and start on the next bag here. So now that I finished that whole bag, right, I had everything in it. I'm going to throw this set of bags away and start a new set of bags. And try to get all this through. These aren't too bad. It won't take long again. Let's get set off to the side. And you've got C2, C3, and this is C1, which I had cut open already, but because I wanted to measure something. These are all build. So open one bag, build it. Open one bag, build it. Open one bag, build it. But I'm going to take and I'm going to shove these in here. I found that we have some aluminum balls that take the place of these standard balls. So I like to use them because they're lighter. These ones last for freaking ever, which is awesome. But I'm going to set these to the side. These aluminum balls are LOSA 6056. LOSA 6056. You get 4 to a bag, just so you know. But I'm going to go ahead and use these. So the first thing I do always, I get a reamer, a body reamer, and I'm going to take and I'm going to just hit the inside of all these a tiny bit, you know, probably 2.5 to 3 rotations of the reamer. One thing to note, the kits come with a 60 millimeter in length turnbuckle instead of a 50 millimeter in length turnbuckle. I know the manual says 50, but it is 60. The 50 will work as well. The 60 goes, you basically thread these up to the threads so you know you have them the same length, and then that way you adjust them in, and there's plenty of thread depth to adjust them to get the proper toe. So that's fine. I am, however, going to use titanium turnbuckles because it's a cost-effective way to save a lot of weight. Just as an example, these 2 front turnbuckles alone are 11.9 grams. These 2 titanium ones are only 5.5 grams, so they're less than half the weight. So these are going to get set to the side. As far as titanium turnbuckles go, we used to sell them. It's the same set as the original 8X. So if you've got a set for your 8X, pull them off of that before you sell it or whatnot. Put the stock ones on there. But we're not going to sell titanium ones anytime soon. But freaking J&T Bearing Company, Tyler, started offering them, and they're freaking awesome. If I would have bought them before this. I just have these left over. They're less than $50, so super inexpensive for what you're getting. Yeah, J&T Bearing Company. Do search for it. Go to the titanium link, and then 8X, $50, cheap. You get all 6. That's what I will be doing moving forward. And then if you really want to trick them out, you can have Wally builds. You can either buy them from him. He buys them from Tyler. He can make them cool colors. So a bunch of different companies. So, but that's what I recommend. So here's how I build a turnbuckle. I take it. There's a line on the turnbuckle. You see that line right there? For TLR turnbuckles, that line always represents standard screw side, meaning that's righty-tighty. And the other side would be the opposite thread. So I take this, I put it on my turnbuckle, my TLR turnbuckle wrench. This was an early prototype, that's why it's black, but it's the same thing. Stick it in there, I hold it, I got it between this finger and that finger, and I'm pushing down. And then I just start threading. 10 scale ones I put grease in, 8 scale ones I don't. And then I just go like this a little bit. And then I turn it over and I do the same thing on this side. Now, because I used the, sorry, I guess I'm not really showing really well. Because I used the reamer, it goes on there really easy. And then I want to go till they're flat with each other and about the same length left and right. It's still not exactly right. Now again, if you're using the stock turnbuckles, you can literally go just till you hit the end of the threads and be fine. So with the exception of the steering turnbuckles, it doesn't really matter as long as you kind of get these about even. You can see I'm about a half a thread off, and I'm super anal when it comes to that. So I'm just going to go about another half thread. Now they look even to me. I'll talk about it when I put these on the car, but the one thing about steering turnbuckles you always want to do is measure between here and make sure that your steering turnbuckles are always exactly the same length. That way your ackerman to the right and left are the same. But that's a turnbuckle. Again, a lot of people really struggle with these. 8 scale ones are a lot easier to build, I think, than 10 scale ones. But also the other thing that really helps is to make sure that, you know, you just hit them with a reamer. If it's hard to start, hit them a little bit harder. And I'm going to just thread these on. I don't need to make sure that they're the same length right now. I need to, once I put them on the car, I will make sure that they're the same length. So right now, I don't need to worry about that. I just need to build them so that they're about even between the two and then move on. But that's really all there is to building any of these turnbuckles, guys. I will build them all while we're here, but if you want to bounce, the only other thing I'm going to show is an angled ball end that goes on the rear turnbuckles, which is actually next, so I'll show that as well. But the other thing I want to show you is just like what we talked about, and this is, again, any ball cup that we make anyway. So you can see that one. Whoop, not if I don't do it right. Okay, see how, again, everything looks the same. So, I mean, the same consistency around the hole and up there. So I turn this over. See how there's the nice shiny spot? That's the ejector. So that's the side you want to put the balls in. And again, I'm using these aluminum balls. And I can use a tool for it, except that you can run them like that, right through the middle. So I don't usually use those for putting them in. Those work really well for taking them out. I usually do that and kind of twist on the turnbuckle a little bit. So shiny side, I'm essentially holding it right now, and all I do is pop, and it's in there. Okay, so again, shiny side, it's the side the ball goes in. I'm holding with these, so I can squeeze as tight as I want right now. All it's going to do is ruin the ball. All I got to do is go, and it's right in there, nice and loose, like it should be. All right, guys, so that's that. And again, the steering turnbuckles, once I put them on the car, you can see these aren't close to one another. They're probably a millimeter off of one another right now. Maybe it's harder for you to see. I don't know. But once these go onto the car, the very first thing I'll do before I set toe or anything is make sure these are the same length. And then I'll adjust them equally. And then once I get it pretty close, I'll measure them again and then adjust from there. So there's that. Titanium turnbuckles, J&T bearings. These aluminum balls, if you want them, are LOSA 6056. But I'm going to build this. So this car, once I get to it, I will be showing the aluminum rear hub that we offer. So I'm actually going to build this a little bit different. Again, I'm going to take this bag and these go into here. I'm going to go into this option bag right here and see these funky looking rod ends. I'm going to get those out of there. There's one. And in this option bag, there's all kinds of stuff. There's extra sway bars for setup stuff. There's some different clutch springs. You've got reinforced bladders. You've got a composite or plastic diff center riser instead of the aluminum one. We do also have a carbon one, but the carbon one's an optional piece. Stuff like that. So depending on if you want the center of the chassis to flex more or not, that's in there. I'm going to throw that back in there. So now I have these two. I can take two of these out. I'm going to stick them over here. I'm going to take these again. So the rears are the thickest and longest ones. So let's get what's the difference on these, right? So these you've got 12.2 and 7. So yeah, well, and one's old and dirty because, well, I didn't have two. And yeah, so anyway, so these, the one thing I would stress here is you've got lines, and one of these goes one way and one of them goes the other way. So basically the very first thing I'm going to do, well, is what I did before. So I'm going to zoom them a little bit. 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, these thread in there so far that, I mean, being easier to start versus the opposite. So I'm going to take the two regular balls and I'm going to swap them out for aluminum ones. These threaded ones we don't have, but I really like the threaded ones on the inside. It's just a little bit more security, and for what we're doing, that helps. But so now I've got two regular ones and two angled ones. So the easiest way to make sure I get all this right is the lines are both the same way right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my turnbuckle wrench. I'm going to do this one. This one, the line is going to be this first that I'm going to start. Okay. I love it. I'm doing these things. People are texting me and messaging me and all sorts of stuff. All right. And again, it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to get it started pretty decent. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one and I'm going to turn it the opposite way and start this one in reverse. Okay. You kind of do the same thing with the balls in here. And so some people will want to watch that. Some people will want to bounce. That's your deal. And you can even either hold it like this, you just choose to do so many things. So a lot of people will just put this in like a pair of regular pliers. So like crooked like that. See, this doesn't move at all. Now I can just kind of do my thing, whatever I want. So now the opposite side on this one, the opposite side is the regular thread one. So I'll do the plier method on this one. I put the angles in and I'll just get this going. This one's a little bit weirder because you got to get a few threads going because it's just different since it's at that angle. The nice thing about the plier method is I can see the threads, so I can try to get them pretty even. Okay, so there's that. Now this one I turn around, and let's get this, should be reverse thread, right? Oops, I didn't get the angles in there right. Oh, you pile. See, that's what happened. There we go. Now we're good. Okay, so make sure it's straight. And then I can take and use this. Looks a little wonky as it's going around, but it's actually perfectly fine. That looks pretty close, so we'll just take that. All right, so now the other thing to understand is I always, when I build my car, this line always goes to the left, okay? Or in the US, it would be the US driver's side. So I'm gonna set these down here with that line to the left and that line to the left. And I know that this goes to the outside, right? for this, the other turnbuckle or the other hubs we have. So I'm going to put these in. There and here. Whoops. Yeah, I got it a little bit. My bad. And then the other thing that I know is this is going to sit in the car like this, which means that I want the ball. It doesn't really matter because you can always turn it a half a turn. But I mean, if I'm building it and I know which way it's going to be, is might as well just do it. So this one, these flat ones, you push and they usually just go right in, right? So there's one. And then this one I want this way. So all I'd say is just be cognizant of the way you want stuff in the car while you're building it. That way you don't have to get as flustered when you're putting the rest together. So there's the rear ones. And again, the length doesn't matter. None of that makes a difference because you adjust all the camber and everything on the car. These are going to go in here. These I'm going to use all of them, and I'll show you this too. So again, pulling those out. Give these a little ream. And you want to make sure the reamer's in straight because basically what you're trying to do is make a cone so that the threads can grab and start easier. More of a cone than what we have going on. I don't know why we don't adjust that, but it's been the same for years. So as much of that in the trash as I can. And then we'll do the pliers because honestly the plier method is a little bit easier as long as you get it into the channel properly. And again, you don't have to go too far. Make sure they're even. And if it gets a little wonky, it'll get in there. But it's your call. It's your car, guys. So don't ever let me tell you to not continue doing something or do something. So some people put grease on the threads. I find on the 10 scale stuff, because they're ball cups, I usually do that. I don't usually do it too often on my 8 scales. Mainly because they're captured rod ends, so nothing's going to really go anywhere. And then if you go to start threading it and it seems like it's really difficult to thread, again, just hit it again with the reamer a little bit and you'll be fine. What's up, GJ? Okay. But if you do put a little bit of grease in there, I'd usually just put a tiny bit on the threads. Some people use chapstick, it works pretty well. But yeah, just a little bit on the threads when you're getting started, and then the rest of it's okay. Sorry guys, it's getting warm in here for me, even though my AC is on. That was new. It actually stopped on the bottom of my chair. Okay. All right, so now the only thing I would recommend, again, I'm going to remove 2 of these balls and put 2 in here. Again, I always make sure this is to the left, right? So one of these, I'm going to take and put the regular ball in, the flat ball in. So what I'm going to make sure I do is then the opposite side. So this, you can see, has the line. Not if I don't put in the camera. The line's right there, and there's a regular ball. So that means this side, there's the line. I'm going to turn it around so the line's opposite what's going to be the regular ball. So I just make sure I do all that first rather than, that way I can make sure they're right. And then this side, You find the easy side, and then you just put these in. So, and then I've got turnbuckles, which usually suck. 8-scale turnbuckles to me are easier to build than 10-scale because they're all captured. So there's my turnbuckles. Nothing too fancy about building turnbuckles, but guys, I'm not plugging J&T because I get anything out of it. I just, good guy, good company. It's a great price for a good product. I've got good diff oils too. And he's super supportive. He's a racer guy and just a really good guy and good family. So let me see if there's any questions that I missed. I know it's skipping ahead, but will the aluminum top brace be black now when available for 2.0? Oh, crap, I got to get off of here soon. The guys are going to use this. So I've got like 2 minutes. It will be black. It should be in next week, the end of August, I think, for that part. Okay, answered that. I have the 8XE Elite. The 2.0 is a completely different car. I mean, I would get it, but that's just me. Depends how important it is. But anyway, guys, thank you. Have a good night. I will schedule one for tomorrow night and we'll continue on. Next will be Bag D, the front end. So have a good night, guys. Take care.